Brothers and sisters of St. Barbara Parish in Old Mission, Santa Barbara, welcome. I'm delighted to be speaking to you from here in the front of the mission with one of our parishioners, Roger Bergman. We're going to be talking about a project that Roger's been working on for a number of years, and it's resulted in the publication of a book, which we'll be talking about. I'd also like to let you know right up front that what we're going to be talking about is going to be incorporated into our faith formation programming coming up this winter and spring, so stay tuned. But for now, Roger, let's talk about your personal story, why it's so important to be talking in front of the church. You came into the Catholic Church here.
Yes, in spring of 1983, while Father Virgil Cordano was the pastor, which happened to be right at the same time that the United States bishops published a letter on the ethics of war and peace, the challenge of peace, God's promise and our response, published May 3rd, 1983. So I came into the church at the same time that this, I think, magnificent document arrived, and this book reflects a lot of what I learned from that pastoral letter.
Well, and I think it's important to note that, not too long after Roger became Catholic, he began to devote his life to the study of Catholic social teaching, and specifically around issues of peace and justice.
Right.
So Roger, let's talk about the book that you've just recently published, and let's say congratulations, first of all, because this is a lot of effort to do what you've done. So can you tell us about the book, maybe by looking at the book itself?
Yes, well, in this case at least, you can tell a lot about a book by its cover. Let's start with the title. It's Preventing Unjust War. I say right up front that the problem is not the just war tradition, which is a claim that some pacifists in the Catholic Church argue, but the problem is the unjust war tradition. And that comes down to the simple fact that almost everywhere in the world there is no expectation that warriors will make an ethical judgment about the wars to which they are ordered to fight. I think that's wrong, and in fact I'm backed up by the tradition of the Church on that. It's taken a long time to get there, but as of 2004 the Catholic Church has endorsed the idea of selective conscientious objection. Not a pacifist argument, but an argument against participation in unjust wars. That was a big part of the Challenge of Peace Pastoral Letter 1983. But the bishops had made that statement, the U.S. bishops had made that kind of statement for about 15 years prior to that.
Wow.
Eventually it makes its way into the global teaching of the Catholic Church.
Well, Roger, one of the things I've always appreciated since we first met is the way that you've modeled a way of tapping our great Catholic tradition in such a way that it makes it current and applicable, and you've really helped us learn. You've helped us with Catholic social learning, not just Catholic social teaching. So that's part of what you're doing in this book, I think.
Yes.
You're tapping the tradition to bring it to today around a very significant issue.
Yes, I would bet that if you took a poll of the parishioners here or across the country, that very few of them would know that the Catholic Church supports the idea of selective conscientious objection. I think most of us are raised to believe that when you are a soldier and you're ordered to go off to war, you have no choice but to go. And since at least 1968, during the Vietnam period, the U.S. bishops have said, no, that can't be right. It's because somebody orders you to do something doesn't make it just.
Well, what you're saying too, I think it's really important, is that faith formation in the Catholic tradition is also about the formation of conscience.
Yes.
So, well, tell us about the book, the title. I love the title.
Yes.
Preventing.
So it's a just war argument for the elimination of war. So think about it this way. Rulers will start unjust wars. The only way they get away with that is because it's assumed that soldiers have no option but to obey. And there have been people, major theologians in the Catholic Church that have said that, Augustine and Aquinas. But there's a development beyond that, up to where I just mentioned, that the U.S. bishops, the Vatican, said, no, that cannot be right. We believe in selective conscientious objection. So I'm trying to play out that argument and suggesting to the Church that it's on paper now, but it's not put into practice in Catholic culture. It's not taught significantly anyway in Catholic high schools, colleges, universities, seminaries, and parishes. People just don't know that this is the tradition. And it really raises the question, is our conscience formed by the Church's tradition or by the political culture that we simply happen to be born into?
What a great distinction, you know, and I think part of what you're pointing to too is the dignity of the human person, you know, the respect for the individual conscience and the sacredness really of that conscience as it interplays with, you know, with political realities, with social realities. And I thank you for that. And I want to ask you a question though. Whose picture is that on the cover of the book?
This is Blessed Franz Jägerstätter. He was beatified by Pope Benedict XVI in 2007. And somewhat more famous, since a major film came out about a year ago called A Hidden Life, which is worth watching. It's a beautiful film, but it doesn't get to the heart of Franz Jägerstätter, I don't think. He was a Catholic farmer in a small village in the mountains of Austria, was known as a bit of ruffian in his youth, but in his 20s he fell in love with and married a very devout Catholic woman, Franziska, and had some sort of conversion or at least intensification of his faith to the point that some of his fellow villagers thought he'd kind of gone off the deep end. But he came to the understanding with only an 8th grade education that if he were to fight in an unjust war, that would make him a murderer, which would go against the commandment, and he would end up in hell for eternity. And despite what his pastor said, despite what his bishop recommended, despite what his wife pleaded with him to do, he refused conscription into Hitler's army, refused to be inducted. He was not a pacifist. He took some military training. He kind of bragged about what a good shot he was. He said, if I were a Frenchman, I would be willing to fight against Germany. So he was not a pacifist, but he refused to fight in Hitler's army. He was court-martialed, he was judged guilty, and was executed by guillotine on the Feast of the Transfiguration in 1943.
My gosh.
And so it took a long time before his story became known and lifted up by the Church, by Pope Benedict.
Wow. Wow. And now, as you mentioned, this movie has come out just this past year. So I think his story is featured in one of the chapters of the book.
The very first chapter.
The very first chapter, yeah. So I love that you've set that, you know, you set this whole discussion, you know, you set it out including a story that makes it very real.
And the key thing for Jägerstätter was that he understood that the bishops of Germany and Austria, who unanimously either didn't oppose Hitler's wars or enthusiastically went along with them, that they lacked the grace to understand what was really going on. So he didn't blame them. So they just lacked the grace. He almost apologizes. He says, I understand, I don't judge them, but I know this is wrong. So the first chapter not only explains Jägerstätter's own story, but says, how did Jägerstätter make that decision? And it's because he referred not to the hierarchy of his day, but to the communion of martyrs of the first centuries. So they were willing to die for their faith. We should be too. And in my case, that means not fighting for Hitler. That doesn't seem like it should be such a difficult conclusion to come to.
Wow, Roddy, I'm getting excited about, I mean, I thank you for this, and you know, I almost feel like we could do another video on this topic, but as I say, we want to weave in the reflection that you've done here and the good work you've done here into our parish faith formation and conscience formation over the next few months. I do want to give a little plug to the Franciscan tradition because somebody endorsed the book.
Yes.
Give us that to wrap up, Roger.
Maybe the best-known Franciscan theologian, and he is OFM, who now teaches at Boston College, Father Kenneth Himes, had this to say about the book. I love the way it starts. Bergman's fine book addresses how to prevent unjust war by issuing 3 challenges to the pacifist tradition and its absolute presumption against any use of violent force, to the just war tradition and its historical deference to political authority rather than the conscience of the individual, and to the Catholic Church as a moral educator forming consciences. His exploration of these challenges will leave readers better informed citizens and wiser disciples.
Wow, exactly what we want at this center of evangelization. Better informed citizens and more animated and committed disciples. Roger, thank you, and thanks to all of you for your attention in this important time in our history as a nation. May the Lord give you peace.
Thank you, Dan.